brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek, for the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. Zola Levitt presents
Hearty shalom to you. Jeffrey Seif here with a Zola Levitt Presents special. And this is special. Thank you for supporting this ministry. It enables us to do things like this. Friends, we've got a guest. Daniel Pipes, renowned expert. Wall Street Journal says he's one of the best of the best. PhD from Harvard University, pretty smart guy, taught there, Princeton, University of Chicago, and elsewhere, and now he's going to be teaching us about the Middle East. Fasten your seatbelt, let's go on a journey and hear from Dr. Daniel Pipes. Mr. Pipes, I just can't believe I'm here talking to you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
A lot of times when I conversate with people, I want to take the lead, but I really prefer deferring to you as the expert. When we think about this Middle Eastern quagmire, what should we have in mind?
Well, that starts big, doesn't it? The Middle East has been, for a century now, one of the world's, if not the world's most volatile region. I think ultimately it has to do with the fact that the Muslim population of the Middle East has found it very difficult to learn to emulate the West. It's in rebellion against modernity. And as a result, it's less democratic and less modern, less technocratic than other parts of the world. Now, there are exceptions, of course. But it leads to this tremendous volatility. So you have volatility in terms of wars, in terms of jihad and violence, small-scale violence, in terms of extremist ideologies, in terms of manufacturing, it's behind. In terms of technology and scholarship, it's behind. Translations, it's behind.
What's your understanding?
It's a troubled region, in short.
What's your understanding of what's behind that? Once upon a time, Islamic civilization was at the vanguard of arts and sciences, statecraft, warcraft. Now it's in the gutter. It's in the, right. And so there's just this raging.
Right, and the fact that the Middle East was at the forefront of civilization 1,000 years ago is part of the problem. Or to put it differently, through pre-modern history, from the origins of Islam around 600 until around 1800, to be a Muslim was to be on a winning team. Yeah. In terms of civilization, in terms of military power, and so forth. So if you go back 1,000 years to 1019, the leading cities of the world were places like Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad. The region went to sleep, was woken up by the European invaders around 1800, and has been trying to catch up ever since. But as I said before, there's this resistance to learning from Europe. Had it been China that created modernity, had it been not Christians, but Chinese, Confucians and Taoists and so forth, it would have been much easier for the Muslims of the Middle East to learn from China. There's even a hadith, a saying of Muhammad, seek knowledge unto China.
Really?
So, yeah, so China would have been much easier, but it was Europe. And that made it very, very difficult.
Tell me what you think of this.
Age-old struggle between Muslims and Christians.
Yes. My understanding is it came to a head in the Battle of Vienna, 1683, I believe. A friend, Karl Raschke, an Islamist out of Harvard, told me that was when Islam was turned around and has been receding ever since when they lost that. Fought on September the 11th. Has that ever crossed your desk?
Indeed, it has, but I don't know if I'd put that much emphasis on it. That was a vanguard position, and it failed. I think there are more fundamental problems and more fundamental losses that one could say the Battle of Lepanto in 1570. One could point to a whole range of problems. But in short, the Europeans began to develop modernity around 1500. And from then until now, the last half millennium, roughly, has been a time of Western exuberance and power and expansion. And the Muslim world has been falling further and further behind.
What are your thoughts about this? My understanding relative to what you just said is that Christian Europe, so-called, in so many ways was in the ghetto. They go on these crusades and they go to take back the Holy Land from the infidels. They run into Muslims. The walls are bigger, the domes are bigger, there's better engineering, there's better math. They discover arts and sciences. And my understanding is that realizing that Christian civilization had been outpaced by Islamic civilization. When they came back to the old world after the wars, this gave birth to the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, and this emergence. Is that overstated, or do you think that's fair?
I would agree with it, but focus more on the intellectual side, less, say, the military technology or architecture, and more the transmission of Greek thought via Arabic.
Because they translated it.
They translated, they maintained, they kept alive Greek thinking in a way that Europe had lost it. But actually, I find it even more interesting, the fact that Europe, if you think of Europe, it's surrounded by a membrane of Islam, of Muslims.
Yes.
From Morocco to the steppes of Central Asia, it's Muslims everywhere. And in large part, the voyages of discovery, the reason why the Americas were founded, were because the Europeans, the Portuguese and Spanish in particular, wanted to get around the Muslim world and find non-Muslims, the Chinese, the Africans, Ethiopians especially, Indians. So one of the explorers, I think it was Vasco da Gama, was asked, "What are you searching?" And he said, "Christians and spices." They were looking for other Christians, which they found in Ethiopia, but mostly they didn't find Christians. They found non-Muslim, non-Christian peoples who they then tried to convert to Christianity in Africa, India, China, and elsewhere. So getting around the Muslim world was very important.
I mean, that raises an issue too. We're pivoting away from the Middle East per se, but Middle Easterners that make their way around the membrane of Europe. Now it's not just around, it's inculcated into European culture. It's ubiquitous, is it not? And a real problem.
Yeah.
For Western civilization.
Yeah.
What will Britain be in 100 years, and France and so forth? Any thoughts on that?
Well, there are two schools of thought on this. The one that dominates, but I don't agree with, holds that the Muslim influx that began, one can date it to 1961 and the German-Turkish work agreement that brought Turkish workers to Germany, that in the last close to 60 years, there's just been an increase of Islam, Muslims, mosques, and so forth, Sharia, and that's just going to increase. Just, you can extrapolate it out. And in terms of population and Islamic customs and so forth, what you see now is less than what you'll see in the future. The other school of thought, which I adhere to, holds that there's a reaction coming in Europe, a powerful reaction against immigration and Islamization. And we're just at the beginning of it. And even now, at the beginning of 2019, you can see that in 5 countries, namely Poland, Czechia, Hungary, Austria, and Italy, the anti-immigration and anti-Islamization forces are, to one extent or another, in power. And I believe that in 15 or 20 years at most, all of Europe basically will be ruled by politicians who are against immigration and Islamization. And so I think that you cannot just extrapolate out that in fact it's going to go down. There's going to be less of it. And you can already see the signs of that. So I think we're at the beginning of a very great battle over the future of Europe and more broadly the West.
Yeah, and to pivot from that, assuming I understand correctly then, European powers are going to feel the need to stave off this assault in various ways. How do they then criticize Israel for wanting to do much the same? Israel being right in the throes of...
Generally speaking, the anti-immigration forces, what I call civilizationalist parties, civilizationalist because they're focused on maintaining Western civilization. They're very friendly to Israel. Now, there are problems and exceptions. For example, recently, the flap between Poland and Israel. Yeah. But I don't see those as serious. Basically, the civilizationalists see themselves in the same boat as Israel and are pro-Israel.
Our resource this week, the Grafted In Package. which includes the series Called Together on 2 DVDs, a grafted-in necklace, 2 Stand With Israel koozies, a grafted-in decal, a grafted-in pin, Our Things to Come bookmark, and the Prophesied Messiah bookmark. Contact us and ask for the Grafted In package. And thank you for your support.
For many, a trip to the Holy Land is the dream of a lifetime. The Bible truly comes alive as you see the sites where so many biblical events happened, where the teaching is always from a messianic perspective. Come on a Zola tour in the spring to see Israel and Petra, or in the fall to add a cruise to Greece and Ephesus. See the land of the Bible for yourself. Contact us to reserve your dream of a lifetime.
Kirsten and David Hart do this a lot better than me, extolling the virtues of a trip to Israel. You'll see them there, but we had to do this program on the quick, so you're stuck with me. I want to thank you for going to Israel, because Israel needs the help and the blessing, and I know you're blessed too. And we're blessed to bless those of you that can't go. And Dr. Daniel Pipes is in effect our tour guide on this program. He's not really a tour guide, but he's an expert taking you to the Middle East. And off we go now to hear from Dr. Daniel Pipes. England, the population there, the number of major cities with Muslim mayors, not that I would have a problem with that necessarily, but it's been said that Islam will do through the womb what it couldn't do with a sword, that is, just take over democracies just by population growth. Is this going to spur this needing to push back?
It's 3 sources. It's immigration, it's children in the country, and it's conversions, all 3. Yes, I do think it is going to lead to a reaction against, though UK is the one exception so far. Basically everywhere in Europe, and certainly the major countries, you see civilizationalist parties on the move. Spain is the most recent one to get a party of this description. UK is the one country that really doesn't have one yet. Maybe UKIP, maybe for Britain, but at this point it doesn't have one. I don't know if one's coming or it's the exception.
In light of exigent circumstances, impending distresses, cultures need to decide, civilizations, states need to decide what they need to do. What about Israel now? We're thrown up against an election. What do you see the cards at play there and any sense of an outcome?
Well, conventional wisdom, which I adhere to here, holds that the right will defeat the left by a small amount, but sufficient to form a government again. There's been a lot of developments within parties and parties working together, but the polls, which are not entirely reliable, suggest that the right will be back. Netanyahu will soon be the longest serving ever Prime Minister of Israel.
5th or 6th?
This will be his 5th.
Okay.
1 in the 90s and then 3 since 2009.
Okay. So that's
but it's close. The predictions are something like 62 to 58, counting the Arab parties on the 58 side. So it's close. It could go either way.
in so many ways that you as an individual, it seems to me, have done more than most as an apologist, as a strategist. We live in a world today where Israel is just maligned on the college campuses, in the press, and you're one of those kind of like John the Baptist voices. I hate to put you in in the New Testament. You don't necessarily walk there comfortably, but you are that lone voice out there trying to cast a vision. What do you want to tell our viewers?
Well, I'm hardly alone. There are plenty who are sympathetic. And
that's right. You're not the only one.
But I am unusual in that I have PhD in Middle Eastern studies. In those circles, it's pretty, if not unique, it's unusual. So to be a specialist, I'm not a specialist in Israel, I'm a specialist on the Muslim world. From that kind of background, it's unusual, yes.
Is it the money that pushes the universities to be so?
No, no. The money increases the reach of the universities, but it doesn't buy the universities. I don't think you could be bought. I don't think I can be bought, and they can't be bought. They have their views, and people with money come and give them more to expound their views. No, it's a big question. Basically, the university was overtaken 50 years ago by the left. It was my generation. I was in school then. It'll be 50 years and 6 weeks since the administrative building was taken over and the students were pushed out by the police and a whole catharsis took place. And that, I think, was the fundamental change. And the left took over the university. And with the university came all the other institutions of American life that
it's been said that change
over.
is life's only constant. Certainly the American university, we're talking about changes in Europe. When you look into the future, what do you see for Israel? Israel's got a lot of pressures roundabout and internal. Is this culture going to stand pretty much the way it is? What are your thoughts, and what can individuals do?
Well, Israel is vibrant and remarkable. Perhaps the single most extraordinary thing about Israel is that the Jewish population of Israel, which is 80% of the country, has a fertility rate that's going up. Unheard of. No other place on earth where modern people are having more babies. Other developments are also remarkable, such as water. Israel is the superpower of water. Water is increasingly a problem as the world's population gets larger. Israel is a place where high tech is astonishing. It's a place where the arts are flourishing. It's got a vibrant democracy. So it's doing well. It's powerful military. I don't worry about Israel. The only possible problem would be weapons of mass destruction, in particular from Iran, but also possibly from other sources. But at the moment, that doesn't seem to be that much of a danger. And otherwise, it has, in general, the problems of success. For example, most of Israeli exports are business-to-business exports. They go into your Apple phone. They're not apples that you eat. In other words, so you can't really boycott Israel.
Yeah, I've heard it said, by all means, boycott Israel, do it, then they'd have to throw away their iPhones.
Exactly.
Good luck.
Exactly, but you go to your grocery store and it can boycott Israeli fruit. Yeah, but that's really not the key. The key is the high-tech components of your electronics and other products.
So if I understand you correctly, and I don't want to assume anything, you're reasonably optimistic. Amras Royal Chai, the people of Israel live, it's strong,
yes.
It's going to stave off the impending darkness.
The past 20 years have been remarkable for Israel. Were we talking in 1999, I would have not been optimistic. The spirit of Israel was rather broken then in terms of dealing with the Palestinians and Arabs. It was, the birth rate was going down, the water problem was exacerbating. It looked like problems and problems. Now,
Looks like
good.
The water's rising. I hear about the Sea of Galilee, and that means the Jordan and the Dead Sea. It sounds like there's some water coming in.
Well, in part it's more rain, but it's also getting more skilled at, one, creating water, desalinization, and two, the ability to save water and conserve water and recycle water. And they're world leaders in all these methods.
So Israel is quite the leader in that part of the world, the only democracy to speak of, a vibrant economy, at the vanguard arts and sciences, the number of PhDs, MAs, bachelors in the workplace. There's got so much going for it. What do people need to know that are kind of on the fence? They hear bad things about Israel. They hear good things about Israel. What do you want to tell the world if I wasn't interrupting you? People, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people watch television. Religious people for the most part in our case, but not exclusively. What do you want to tell them about the Middle East, about Islam, about Israel?
Well, as we discussed before, the Muslim world is going through a very difficult period, is full of resentments and envies, self-doubts. This plays out not just vis-a-vis Israel, but particularly vis-a-vis Israel. I'm sympathetic. I wish the Muslim world well. I do what I can to help in small ways, in terms of understanding it, in terms of having ideas for it. But it is going through a very difficult period. difficult in everything from water, which we just talked about. I mean, the sources of water are drying up all over the Middle East, to focus on that region, to political instability, to war, to anarchy. Tremendously problematic. Other than a couple of small states in the Persian Gulf, like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, one just sees trouble everywhere. Greater trouble. Tunisia is also not doing too badly, but otherwise it's everywhere trouble. And so Israel is having to cope with these peoples and states that are in trouble. And historically, the states used Israel as a diversion to mobilize and distract their people. But that ended long ago. That was in the 40s, 50s, 60s. The states have not been doing that in the last almost half century. They would rather get out of it. As we can see, for example, with Saudi Arabia. They're not interested in making war with Israel. They're interested in getting out of this. So that's one good sign. Another good sign is that the Islamist surge, the surge of radical Islam, I think is kind of peaked and going down. Lots of problems, huge problems, but some wisps of good news on the horizon.
And that's a good report. And I've understood as well, and correct me, that nationalism can provide a certain amount of energy, but religion can provide even more. And there's one thing to fight, the Israelis because we're proud Egyptians. It's another to think that there's 70 plus virgins on the other side of the grave if you put a belt around you. And that evokes energies that wouldn't otherwise be there, and no state can marshal those enthusiasms, correct?
Yes, there was a nationalist period, a pan-Arab period, again, 40s, 50s, 60s. That died. And in its place came an Islamic fervor. But I'm suggesting that that's in the process of dying as well. What comes next? I have no idea.
Okay, but it seems to me that on the whole, if I understand correctly, you sit reasonably secure. People worry about Israel. If I understand you correctly, you think that Netanyahu's government is going to prevail. Israel's not going away as a nation state. People worry about the raging round about Israel, but the state's going to live and the people are going to live in it, and you are reasonably confident, correct?
Yeah, there's a sense of determination, I think is symbolized by the birth rate that's going up. There's a power as symbolized by the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. And there is a place in the world, as symbolized, for example, by the new ties between India and Israel. So yes, the left has turned against Israel. The left, which historically, which back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, was the ardent supporter of Israel, has turned away from it, sees it as a colonial state, apartheid state, and so forth. That's getting worse all the time. Leftist attitudes towards Israel are exacerbating. On the other hand, the Muslim world is not so hostile overall as it used to be. There are breaks, there are fractures in the Muslim approach to Israel. So it's an ongoing story. As you say, changes doesn't ever stop.
Is this correct relative to Islamic views, if you can generalize, toward Israel? My understanding is the further away you get from the Middle East, the less hostile it becomes. And I could be wrong because you're the expert, not me, but certainly the energies roundabout. Most people think all Muslims are Arabs. No, there's a certain percentage, there's more, and there's plenty in Indonesia as well. Is that correct?
Actually, I once wrote an article making the opposite point, that in the Middle East, where people actually have to deal with Israel, there's a complex set of relations, where if you're here in Texas, Israel's far away, and you can just have a very simple, one-dimensional view. And so it's more sophisticated and complex in the Middle East than it is in Japan, in South Africa,
Gotcha.
or in
Well,
Colombia.
I certainly can stand corrected. And listen, my stock has risen in the world in my friends' eyes just because I get to sit down and talk to you. It has really been a pleasure, Dr. Pipes. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for the most interesting conversation.
I'll tell you straight up, when it comes to television, there's a lot of ego, and a lot of guys just want to tell their story. And I don't know, I'm not devoid of ego, but at 63, one of the benefits is you realize there's a world beyond you, and there are people a whole lot smarter than you. And Daniel Pipes is one such person. He's a strategist, he's an analyst, I work a little more with biblical perspective, and I'm not casting aspersions on him in saying that because he's not here to defend himself. I'm more of a Bible student than I am a Harvard-trained expert in the Middle East. And I look at the Bible and I refract things through the prism of a biblical understanding. And what a world it is. And it's Zola Levitt Presents, by the way, that you support, that we're your Daniel Pipes. We get to pipe in every now and again and look at what the Bible says on one hand and the newspaper on the other and see how it might fit together. Speaking of which, here's an opinion piece that came from the International Jerusalem Post. Interestingly, it's written by an Islamic imam who's talking about the question, is Israel a sacred Islamic city? He plays it down, interestingly, and gives voice to the fact that there isn't a lot of early history where Jerusalem factored center stage in Islamic thinking. You might want to get this article. Is Jerusalem a sacred Islamic city? The answer is no in this set of information. Is Jerusalem a sacred city? The answer is yes, right here. Speaking of here, thank you for being here with us. We love you and appreciate your support for Zola Levitt Presents.
From the beginning, our Creator revealed His will to the common man. Individuals who listened to His call and responded in obedience. From the first Hebrew Avraham to the culmination of salvation in Messiah Himself, the Lord faithfully intervenes with His divine deliverance.
You just saw some great pictures. Oh, I'm so excited to bring you that series, Divine Deliverance. But that's next week. And as you go now, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Our monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter, is free and full of insightful articles and news commentary from a messianic perspective. Visit levitt.com to find our newsletter, along with current and past programs, our television schedule, and much more.
Don't forget to order this week's resource by calling 1-800-WONDERS, or you can purchase it from our store at levitt.com.
Your donations to Zola Levitt Ministries help these organizations bless Israel.
Thanks again for joining us this week. Zola Levitt Ministries and this television program depend on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you.
This has been a paid program brought to you by Zola Levitt Ministries.